I woke up quite early this morning and drove out here to take some pictures of the bearded reedlings. And as you can see, autumn has arrived. It's quite fresh out here and it's also quite foggy, unfortunately. I see a bit of blue sky when I look up, so I hope that once the sun will get a bit higher, it will manage to push through the fog and kind of dissolve it, and I hope that then I can take some pictures of the bearded reedlings. I was here the last time, I think 3 years ago, and it was not a very successful outing, so I hope today will be better. Today I brought the R5 Mark II and the RF 600mm f4, but I decided to also bring along a bit shorter lens, a zoom lens, in this case the RF 100-500. I just think it's a bit more flexible and I have some ideas in mind that I would like to try out, and I hope I can give you some tips and tricks for taking pictures of bearded reedlings or other kind of fast moving birds that are like just flying around the reeds and trying to look for some food there. So my wish regarding the weather came more or less true. The fog started to clear during the morning and it got even sunny in the end, and I managed to take some pictures of the reedlings. There were several challenges. So first of all, even on a calm and like windless morning as today, it's sometimes not so easy, because as soon as the reedlings land on the reeds, they start to move a bit, just because they are so thin, especially in the top of the reeds where the seeds are that the reedlings are looking for. They just start moving immediately. So one thing that you will need is a rather short shutter speed. I usually try to stay at like 1/800th of a second or even shorter, more on that later. And as I mentioned before, I took both my RF 600mm f4 and also the 100-500mm. My idea was, when it was a bit more foggy in the beginning, that I could maybe include a bit more of this mood, of this environment, of this foggy environment. But it didn't really work out because there was not much activity in the beginning and the reedlings were not sitting on top of the reeds. And then if they just sit somewhere in the middle and you put them kind of small in frame, it doesn't work. The reedling needs to be kind of on the top, exposed against a bit brighter background so that you can actually see the bird. And this was not the case, so I started to do more the classical shots with my RF 600mm f4 lens. And because the reeds were moving a bit, I also tried to focus on the reedlings that were a bit farther away, meaning not like 4.5 meters or something close to the minimum focus distance of my RF 600mm lens, but maybe 7, 8, 9 meters, and also include part of the reeds because I think it shows the habitat quite well. It was not always easy to photograph them. Usually you hear when they are coming in, you heard them somewhere down there, but I often couldn't see them just because there was some reeds that were blocking them, and you really needed to wait for one that was finally sitting in a nice position where you had a more or less clean background and where you were able to kind of see the whole bird without having a reed going in front of it or directly behind the bird. So this was a bit challenging. Also in terms of autofocus, it's not very easy with this like kind of distracting background. What helped for me quite well was using the spot autofocus without a tracking or anything. This worked quite well with my R5 Mark II. What I sometimes still needed to do was to pre-focus. Luckily on the R5 Mark II you can set this up a bit better than on the original R5. Otherwise I can just manually override the focus. This also works, just to bring the focus kind of close to the, basically bring the whole focal plane close to where the bird is. And afterwards the animal eye detection autofocus was actually doing a great job in tracking the reedling. So I shot handheld all the time because I just like to be flexible, because as I mentioned, there's so many reeds, so sometimes moving like 30 centimeters to the left or to the right can make a big difference whether you see the bird or whether it's like behind some leaves or reeds. This was definitely helpful, even though I need to say like a monopod would maybe have been a good solution. Some photographers around me had monopods and it seemed a bit easier, especially if a reedling was sitting in one spot for a while. Granted, this didn't happen very often, but if it happened, it was getting a bit tiring to handhold the big lens for a long time. So maybe next time I will think about bringing a monopod, or I should buy one first. Otherwise, it worked quite well, as I mentioned, also with the eye detection autofocus. During the morning, the wind increased a bit, and this made it a bit trickier because this meant that, first of all, the reeds where the reedlings are sitting on are like moving, but also sometimes there were really other reeds going in front, which is, of course, a bit a challenge for the autofocus. The R5 Mark II handled it quite well, at least with the correct settings. What I did was mainly to lower the, I think it's called AI servo reaction or something, to -2, so that the camera stays more locked on the initial subject, on the bird, and doesn't get distracted by reeds or other things that move in front of the bird. So I got some shots there. I also tried some vertical shots because sometimes it worked quite well with the composition. And when I got a bit more light, I also wanted to try the pre-burst of the R5 Mark II with the reedlings taking off. It was not always easy because often, you notice probably, they just take off in the wrong direction, but I managed to get some shots. The background is not as clean as I would have liked, but I was quite happy. Most of the images were sharp, and especially this one is an image I'm quite happy with. Unfortunately, both the sun got stronger and stronger, even though now we have some clouds, but maybe you can also see, and hopefully not hear, there is quite some wind now. And basically this also ended the photo session because it's very hard to photograph as there's a lot of wind, and actually the activity of the reedlings decreased dramatically. So basically they were not very active in the morning, and then around 9 or so I think they started to peak a bit in their activity, and around 10:30 or so it really decreased again, and in the end there was no reedlings around anymore, so also no reason for me to stay there. So I tried to explore the area a bit more, see if there is some waterfowl that I could take pictures of. Of course, there were some coots and ducks, but the ducks are not in their breeding plumage. And the perspective is often not so easy in these nature protection zones because you're a bit elevated. I saw an osprey that was hunting for fish. I tried to take some pictures, but also there it was still a bit too far away and the background didn't fit very nicely. So I decided to pack my things, go home. I was very happy to meet some other photographers today, some new photographers. And yeah, now I'm heading back to the car and then driving back to Switzerland, probably stopping for some lunch in between. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or tips that you have, maybe for Nikon with autofocus for taking pictures of reedlings, just drop them in the comments. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.